Still the Southeast News. Today, yes, I did say we were going to talk about something. Just follow me. When it comes to a child's upbringing, safety and growth, parents and instructors are crucial. Varies. The attitudes of parents and teachers may significantly alter how inclusive education is seen or inclusiveness anywhere is seen. Children, people with special needs. These are who we refer individuals who have different types of needs to. Generally, they are called disability. Whether it's a learning disorder, it's a development disorder, provided people need some form of support. Many people see them as coming from a position of disability, which shouldn't be. It's difficult for them to participate in mainstream education. Anything mainstream, it is a difficulty. Funny bit is that a number of children with special needs vary from city to city and from region to region. We're going to talk about inclusivity in Nigeria, but more especially in the Southeast. After all, this is the Southeast News. And with me is a certified nurse and advocate for disability and gender inclusion. She is a champion of equitable access, living with disability. She founded Diverse Health Initiative and she works with RAID Aid Nigeria. She is passionate about inclusive education and healthcare and empowering marginalized communities. Who are we talking about? You should know by now because she has been working, trying to turn and change the tide and the narrative for quite a while now. Precious Henry. Precious, welcome to Southeast News.
Thank you, Barry.
It's good having you here. And people will think that I know a lot about you, but it's not true. So can you tell us a little about yourself before we get in deep into the conversation?
You already said a lot. Of course, why would you know a lot about me? We've been talking. My name is Precious, and of course, Barry, I've just said it all. Annette, a person living with disability, and of course, a chronic advocate for gender and disability inclusion. It's nice being in your studio.
It's nice having you here. Now, you are coming from a background. Some people were born with disabilities, but you are coming from a background of ability. And from our conversation, I discovered that what is more important to you, and I guess that's why you love the tag chronic, is because you know that whatever the background is, what is important is the humanity in us. So you can take it away from there.
All right, thank you so much. Of course, when I said chronic, I am very, very intentional about it because we live in a society where the most vulnerable persons are not usually considered in our plannings, in our budgets, in all our activities, and you see that these people are usually discriminated against. These are people that cannot really speak for themselves. These are people who do not even have access to quality information, to quality education, to care. And because of their state of health and the situation they've found themselves, they cannot be properly integrated into the society to speak for themselves. And I haven't found myself in that community as a person who met blindness 11 years ago. I see it as an opportunity to actually advocate for equitable inclusion, for these marginalized demographics. And you see, we are talking about persons with disability. There are lots of disability type. We're talking about those with visual impairment, those with hearing or speech impairment, those with intellectual disability, those with retarded growth, yeah, people we call dwarfism, people with little stature, yeah. And then we also have people living with spinal cord injury. We also have albinism. These people, you know them, we call them Oyibo,
Yes, I know,
people with
albinism.
living with albinism. And also we have there's this generic name, we call them physically challenged, and these are people with their hands amputated, maybe their lower limbs amputated, but they live with one form of amputee, whether hand amputee or leg amputee, or they have some form of difficulty walking. So you see, these are various, and there are still more classification coming up in terms of different people with different disability, and these are people we are talking about for their inclusion into our society.
Now, how do we make this happen? Is it from the early ages? Remember, we talked about an educational system and education environment. How can we begin to encourage inclusivity?
All right, thank you so much. You see, off-camera conversation, we talked about how people view persons with disability as people who are not productive at all. And that's why I look at some organizations that are basically into persons with disability. Of course, I give so much kudos to your wonderful station, your television station, for being thoughtful to think about inclusivity in your programs. Organizations like Rated Nigeria that have been into disability for over 60 years, championing affairs of persons with disability. And these are kind of people that will look at persons with disability and say, come and work with us. We still find you useful and productive. Now, taking it from there, how do we include these people? And we are looking at education sector. You know, there are broad spectrums of this. If we are talking about integration of these people, let's look at it from three different angles. Angle number one, what did policy say about integrating persons with disability in our education? What is our policy saying? Number two perspective, it's how can our regular teachers, we are talking about education from the crèche, the primary, the secondary, the higher institution, how can we prepare these, our educators, to be fit enough to provide special education to those people? That's number two. Number three, different disability with different peculiar needs. How do we factor these in our educational materials, in our educational curriculum, in our environment, educational environment, to ensure it fits into everybody's need, since we're talking about integration? Let's unbundle this thing. I'll just cite an example to you. Some years back, I think that's still in practice, somewhere in the southeast, a school called CIC, they run a form of an integration school, but that's exclusively for the blind. I think there's another school like that somewhere in Anambra too, where they have some form of integrated school where some persons with disability and people without disability are actually schooled together. How do we make this work? Remember, this is strictly for persons with visual impairment. How do we bring in the hearing impaired? Because of their need. Remember, this hearing impaired can't hear you, maybe can't speak, as a speech impaired person. So how do we bring them in? For me, one way forward, let's go back to our policy. Can we look at our policy, amend this policy that from our national, where budgets are being made, educational budgets are being made. Since we are talking about leave no one behind, we are into sustainable development goal, and we are talking about leave no one behind, integration, inclusion of these people. So from our national level, let's begin to negotiate, advocate, just as Signature TV is doing. It's part of sensitization and advocating, so that our Ministry of Education will make proper budgets to ensure that education materials for these different disability type are being captured. Number two, still at the national level, can we begin to look at our Disability Act here in Nigeria? Didn't really say much about integrated education for children living with disability. It's difficult with adults living with disability going through the regular school. Talk more of a child who met disability in your early childhood. It's quite difficult. Now, let's begin to look at our policy to tailor it in a way it can keep a level playing ground for these children. If you say, take for instance, a government secondary school, it's going to be an integrated school. Can we have a special education teacher, a policy that supports that a special education teacher should be there, that will capture Braille learning, inclusive education for the blind, accessible education for the hearing and the speech impaired, and even an accessible environment for a person on a wheelchair, like a spinal cord injured person? What about writing for someone whose hands are amputated? So these are tools, policy that we should begin to think how to factor it in our education system. People living with albinism, you see, let me bring down your mind to something. You know, these people living with albinism, which is a type of disability, actually they have issues with sun and exposure. And let's say a school, it said our school uniform is going to be a short sleeve, a short knicker, and you are exposing the skin of this person
To the
living, and in the next couple of years, probably the person comes down with skin cancer. So let's begin to have a policy that is friendly, that can give a level playing ground to these people and their need. And of course, this list is inexhaustive, but let me make do with this third one, is to let's begin to build the capacity of our educators. Our educators will play a vital role in making this work. Most of the teachers or most of the schools that can actually provide these integrated services, you see some parents taking their children there. So the more capacity of our educators we build, the more they are readily available to provide these integrated services. I think I will hang it on for now.
Yeah, well, while you hang on, something occurred to me while you were talking.
All right.
Because I did ask from childhood, how can we start an intentional policy? And you made mention of some of the ideas of the type of policies we need to put in place,
Yeah.
so that a child, will, for whatever reason, has a disability, from the get-go, the parents will know that this facility is somewhere, and that facility is designed to integrate what you may term normal with someone with disability from the get-go. So that school caters for the special needs. If it's a ramp for you to get into classes and whatever you're going to do with it, if it's a classroom where the braille is there so that
A blind
A
person
blind
can,
can confidently sit. Somebody who, for whatever reasons, doesn't have a hand, can use the speech and get
and write.
these things done.
Yeah,
I think we should begin to think of it.
of course.
But where I'm going is this. What point in one's life is it the best time to talk about integration?
Integration.
Because currently it does appear as if parents are left alone to take that decision. Yes, you can say because they are the parents, but if the facilities were provided, remember, not at a very high cost, you see parents making the right decisions.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, yeah, Barry, of course, your concern is just a very unique one. Talking about at what, I like how you were very specific in your question. At what point do a parent begin to think of integration? My dear, the very point you discover that your child have this ability. Now, let me tell you something. 2013, when I lost my sight, do you know when I got rehabilitated? 2017. Imagine the years I lost. And of course, by then I've already finished with my nursing and midwifery. So what came to my head was like, Precious, how come either you or your family members or support givers never thought of rehabilitation? Does it mean there were no rehabilitation? Does it mean that you people couldn't have afforded it? The question is that the decision to make a step forward when you discover your loved one, your child, has this ability is a difficult one. Now, it still boils down to policy, awareness, sensitization. These three things are key. When a parent who gave birth to a child at 1, 2, normally this child should have started maybe with a crutch, and you notice that at 2, my child is having difficulty to talk. My child can't see. My child can't hear. There's difficulty in walking. No, that is not time. Yeah, in as much as you're still battling with the emotional and all the depression, trying to get all the best health care you can get, it's also time to begin to integrate that, send that child to that integrated school. Yeah, it sounds difficult, but this is how or what the Westerners, that is where they have an advantage over us. Excuse me, why they do the medicals, they are busy also trying to rehabilitate. The medical treatment meets them at the point, let everything happen at the same time. The very moment you discover that your child has this ability, that is the time the child should be integrated. You begin to think of rehabilitation, begin to think of integration. Another aspect of it is that, you see, I've observed within the few years I've worked with our organization, I noticed some parents who have their wards, their loved ones living with disability. You know what? They'll lock them up inside the house. They will not allow the child, maybe because they are protecting the child, they are trying to keep the child away from harm. But if we can have this massive awareness, massive sensitization to say no, that is not the right thing to do. If also we can have the policy, even you as a mother, in the Western world they do it. You and I can agree that in the Western world, there's a way you're not careful with your child, they will take it. They will take the child.
Social welfare.
They will take the child away from you. So if we have a policy that say you as a mother, you gave birth to this child at so year, and this child have been diagnosed with one form of disability. Come on. and you didn't do the needful, the law will come after you. So by the time these people begin to comply with such laws or policies, you find out that this will be a workable initiative.
Yes, but majority of what you said boils down to information, which should be power. But look around you. How many people possess 10% of the information you have now? Remember, you said when you met disability, it took you some time to realize that this community has been existing.
Yeah.
Now, you would also notice that for majority of Nigerians, I may be wrong, but for majority of Nigerians, the very first port of call when they notice disability in their child, many times it's not even a hospital. And the next port of call may be the hospital, but not looking for a place that will offer rehabilitation and inclusivity.
Yeah.
So that becomes another problem.
It's a problem. I totally agree
Because
with you.
you discover that we are in Enugu now. This studio is in Enugu.
Yeah.
We're transmitting from Enugu. And in Enugu, how many government facilities are established to be inclusive? How many are there to ensure that if you have any form of disability, you can have education free of charge, thus taking away the burden from your parents or your guardians?
All right.
So I want you to put all this together now.
I certainly understand clearly what you're trying to say. Of course, that's actually where I give a thumb up for Radiate Nigeria. You see...
Oh, not government. Because I asked,
wait, I'm coming.
Okay,
I'm coming. You know, we boil down a lot of things to the government. Who are this government, Barry?
We
are the government. We are the government.
But there is a but.
I'm coming, hold on. It's you and I that actually make up this government. Many a times I've observed closely, even in the Western world, where things are working. At times, it's usually the good-hearted people, the philanthropists, you see them coming up to initiate that process. Do you get it? Now, they do it after a while. That is where advocacy and policy trying to get the buy-in of the government to actually do that. Why I first mentioned Radiate, you see, what we do at Radiate, part of the things, because they do part of the things they do there is identify this persons with disability. For example, if you are a parent and your ward or your child has been diagnosed with one form of disability or the other, you know what we do? If you reach out to us, we'll be able to link you up to a rehabilitation center where your child could be rehabilitated while you receive proper medical treatment. Do you get it? And another thing is this, talking about the government, you know, we have organizations of persons with disability. This is also where I strongly believe that when we begin to create this awareness, sensitize them to collaborate with the government from our different hospitals. You said that the point of call, many occasions, usually it's not hospital. Maybe hospital might be the second point of call. But be it either the hospital, the religious body, or the traditional healers, there should be a collaboration with these entities once a child is identified to have disability, to link, to refer for rehabilitation.
Just hold it there. Hold your thought. But remember, with the three different groups we mentioned,
Okay.
the traditional healers, the religious body,
Yeah.
and
The hospital.
the hospital, they'll give you three different perspectives.
Of course, I
So
do agree with you.
where do we have the point of collaboration?
Fine, fine. These things have actually worked. They've worked. There's this research that Rede did where basically they do something with people with borreliosis. And we found out that so many people will come report to the hospital late with much impact of borreliosis that have eaten up their flesh. Now we begin to ask questions. Where is their first point of contact? The religious body, the traditional healer to say, okay, no. We moved on to have a research to collaborate with these people. When you see these people, bam, you treat. 1, 2, you can't do it. Please send them to us. Barry, do you know what? It worked like magic. We have these people harvested in numbers from these traditional healers. Now, how these things can be replicated in visibility.
I look forward to that.
It can be, and this is the kind of platform that will create that awareness. That's why this discussion, of course, there's a broad spectrum to it. It's actually inexhaustive. So if we begin to create strong awareness, collaborating with these three entities I've mentioned, to say, once you notice a child with this, yeah, the religious people will tell you, yeah, this is demon, this is spirit, this is things from your village, blah, 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 and all of that. Okay, the medical, the medical practice would tell you this is scientifically what it is. However, where did all of this converge? The point of rehabilitation. Whether it's the village people that is doing it, let's begin to rehabilitate this person. If I was still at home being locked up without being rehabilitated, Barry, you will miss me. You would have been someone locked up.
Having this conversation with somebody.
Yeah. So whether you said it's spirits, fine and good, get this person rehabilitated.
I think I like the collaboration you're talking about, but how can we get it working?
How we can get it work? It's one. You and I are here talking about this. The public are getting aware of this conversation. Our lawmakers get to know about it. The people that makes the policy get to know about it.
Have you taken advocacy to the lawmakers? Let's start with Enugu, where you are,
Okay.
or to policymakers. So that
Have
they
I
begin,
tried having an advocacy with them?
Yes, so that they begin to understand what you know.
Okay.
Remember,
Right.
excuse me,
Okay.
I did say
Okay.
information is power.
Very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. I can agree less.
So where are we
Okay,
starting the
fine.
advocacy?
Now, to start with the advocacy, first, the advocacy should start with parents. With parents. We can start this advocacy. Different schools have parents teachers association, right?
Yeah.
We can start with school. We can start with religious body. We can start the advocacy there. When we harvest the parents to know, Madam, this is what you are supposed to do when you discover your child have one form of disability or the other. It will be a lot easier to do the talk than talking the talk. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do.
It will be easier for a mother to understand this is what I'm actually supposed to do, and she will do it, than when you, the government, is coming to pursue this woman around with your policy. Some years ago, there's this policy about girl child and going to school. But Barry, you will agree with me, there are still a lot of girl children on the streets hawking and selling. Who are the owners of those kids? Parents. So let's identify these parents through schools, any platform where we can have it, through schools, through religious body, through our different corporate bodies. It could be in the office, could be in the church, could be in the mosque, wherever we can identify and have parents together. Let's begin to create awareness. This is the first point of advocacy. Another point of advocacy is our governments. I understand the difficulty trying to navigate, meet with lawmakers to get their buy-in, in your opinion, okay? But that's another very, very effective way to get this done. If our government or the lawmakers buys into the fact that a child who has been diagnosed of autism should undergo rehabilitation, should be integrated, should have right to education, they know how they enforce laws that are very important to us. And we are talking about the future of our children. Do you get it? We are talking about the future of our children. So this should be very important to them as well. And of course, another point of advocacy is to get more civil society organizations to begin to buy into this, to know that so many organizations, they do not talk about disability and inclusion. So if so many civil society organizations begin to buy into disability and all its inclusive approaches, you see more hands coming to work in this vineyard.
I like that vineyard. Why I keep asking what the government is doing is, if all of us gave the mandate and we have people who are in government who are the leaders, whoever has a disability becomes what the Constitution says. The first task of government is the welfare of the people.
Sure.
That's why I keep saying government.
Okay.
Now, I expect that if the right policies are made, if no one is left behind, because it's not, I recall long ago, we were told that there will be education for all in the year 2000.
Millennium goal.
Some people were not born then, and now they are finding it difficult to be educated, either because they live so far away from schools, or they don't have enough money to go to schools. But then, education for all, year 2000. So, it's not a catchphrase. Government should be able to begin now,
to take
charge and say the welfare of the people, which includes all sectors, all segments. You and me? Yes.
I totally agree with you, Barry.
So how do we get them to do what they are
supposed to do? You see, Barry, I see. I know why you keep pointing the government. I'm very sure you're not new in the corridors of our nation and its policy. Of course, at some point, we all know that the government, they try to say what they will do, but doing what they say they will do, it's where we are having issues.
So how do we get them?
So now, how do we get them? How do we
towards
get
that
them
direction
to understand? It's still, you keep advocating.
I don't mind that.
You keep advocating. You keep going to the lawmakers, you keep talking to the policy makers. You see, what's it now? United Nations and Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability was signed into treaty with Nigeria, as in the Nigeria signed the treaty into law, and they are part of the United Nations that signed that. I don't want to tell you about the level of compliance.
You can't say it because the level of compliance
Here in this state,
directly impacts
on the people.
on our conversation.
Yeah. Now, not just that. Okay, come to think of this acts of disability as inefficient, because I consider that law to be inefficient. I'm sorry, I'm entitled to my opinion. And I'm just saying that there are a lot of gaps in that
So
law.
give us an idea of some of the gaps.
Okay,
what
fine.
makes it inefficient?
Fine. In that act, you see a provision for health services, and the provision, the act, the law, it's now a law. The law made provision for treatment for person with mental disability. Now my question is it only person with mental disability should access health care? What about the blind, the deaf, the people with
Physically
speech?
challenged.
So they should also access health care. Remember, there are just a handful of persons with disability who are working. Because I understand if you're working in the government, you should be able to access your health insurance. What about those who are not working? Okay, Nigeria, currently now, there's this form of health insurance for people who are not working, but you pay a certain fee to enroll. But you are aware there are people who cannot even afford that amount to pay to be enrolled, or to even afford that 10%. So can we begin to look at where we can think of the health burden? And you know that disability has a way, as you keep growing or advancing, it keeps reiterating. More issues keep coming up, just like aging. The more you grow old, the more some of your, you begin to degenerate. So it's even worse in this ability. So is there any way we can take away some medical bills on these people? Take, for instance, person on a spine. I'm talking about the gaps now.
Injury, yeah.
Do you know how much they spend to maintain or even to be changing their catheter? So many of them are on indwelling catheter because they have to urinate from their catheter. Do you know how often they changes that? The nurse that will come and change the catheter, change the urine bag, just be changing all those things. Do you know how much they spend on medication, physiotherapy? We can begin to think of taking away. So that provision is not there in that law. Do you get it? And some of the penalty or punishments in that law, for me, it sounds funny. It's not realistic. So there are quite some gaps there. I just mentioned one aspect. In Nigeria now, in our government health institution, if person with hearing impaired goes to, we are transmitting from Enugu. If you go to not polyclinic, Parkland now, I can bet you won't get a sign language interpreter that will be there to communicate with this hearing or speech impaired person. How do you expect such people to come and access healthcare? So it should be provided, it should be made available in that law. It should be made available. So such gaps are still, those things are not provided. So it should be part of the thing that will form the law. So when I say, even with the ones they provided there, what's the rate of compliance?
Okay.
How is our structures, our buildings? So you see, when you're talking about how do we get the government, I'll tell you, my brother, it's a big work. But do we stop? No, we keep advocating, we keep lobbying, we keep seeking for their buy-in until the right thing is done. Remember when we started, I said, it's one thing to make a policy or a law. It's another thing to do it. There are child rights acts, but how many governments, institutions, or organizations are complying to that act?
We'll get there.
All
Well,
right.
I
I pray so.
I want to say thank you very much,
Thank you,
Precious
Barry.
Henry, for coming on to Southeast News. But my takeaway from this conversation is that it's a long walk, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
But we'll keep at it
Integration is possible.
and keep the pressure on. So
Yeah.
thank you for coming on again.
Thank you so much.
And that's
Thank you,
where we
Barry.
say it's a wrap for today's edition of Southeast News. As I say, a big thanks not only to you,